Welcome to another session on LodeStar. And today's session is going to be a little tricky for those individuals who haven't, for those teachers who haven't done much coding or any coding. You may ask yourself, well, why should I bother to learn any code? Because that's the point of LodeStar, isn't it? Isn't it to be able to create, impactful projects without the use of code? Well, yes, that is the point of LodeStar, but there are times when a little bit of code will take you a long, long way. And if you're creating, whether it's decision-making scenarios or even just simple simulations, a bit of code will help. And I'll take this apart, I'll break this down so that hopefully this will be in nice manageable chunks. Now, today's project will be controlling a traffic light with the click of a button. And well, again, you might say, well, traffic light, that has nothing to do with the kinds of projects that I'm engaged in. Yes, but this particular project has just about everything you need to know in it. And it's just a few lines of code. It will take you a long way. And of course, you can apply them to projects that are meaningful. I know that you won't be creating, traffic light simulators necessarily, but the things that we're going to learn are things that you can apply to real life projects. So we're going to begin with the Activity Maker template. That's our Swiss Army knife template. And we'll double click on that, and we're creating a traffic light demo here. So we'll go ahead and title it as such. Now LodeStar is basically creating a project folder called Traffic Light Demo, putting that into the LodeStar projects folder. So you have a projects folder, and then all your individual projects are all in their respective folders. So that's what's happening now, and then we get to our first page. So we're page 1 of 1, and we'll go ahead and make this our title page. So we'll just call this Traffic Light Demo, and we'll give that a styling, heading 1, center that. We'll also put in a page ID. We'll call this intro, and hit the plus. That gives us another page with the page type here is text. It's the same page type as before. This is page 2, and we'll call this traffic lights because this is where our traffic lights will appear, the ones that we control with the push of a button. Now, the second objective for today is that we're using code to change the properties of an SVG graphic. SVG stands for Scalable Vector Graphic. So we'll click on SVG, and that'll bring up our SVG editor. I'll maximize that. Now, SVGs, those are graphics that are controlled. Basically, they're controlled by commands. So we have commands, we have language that creates rectangles and circles and paths. That's quite a bit different than, for example, a bitmap graphic. A bitmap graphic is like a spreadsheet of color values. So for example, if we had a bunch of rows and columns that had the color blue, we would know that this was maybe part of a body of water or the sky or whatever. That's what a bitmap graphic is. And the disadvantage of a bitmap graphic is that it's not scalable. Once you start to scale it up, it loses its resolution, its sharpness, its crispness. SVG graphics can scale up to any size because they're basically what's being stored is not this, what they call a raster, not this spreadsheet of color values. What's being stored are the commands, and it doesn't matter how large your canvas is, the commands will still work and paint a graphic of any size on any sized graphic canvas. So, but you can mix and match the two. You can embed bitmap graphics inside of scalable vector graphics, and we're going to show that here. So I'm going to start with my little image tool here, and this brings in a bitmap graphic. So I'll click here, and I have some traffic lights here, and I'll go ahead and open those. And again, if I made this really, really large, you could start to see that, our lines get fuzzier and fuzzier. But this is a good starting spot. So we're going to combine a bitmap, a PNG, together with some scalable vector graphics. So I'll start with, these will represent my lamps. So I'll cover up what's here with my lamps. I'll hold down the Shift key. So I've clicked on the ellipse, the circle tool, get that to a certain size. So holding down my Shift key, make sure that I have a perfect circle. And I'll go ahead and kind of gray that out. Before I even touch the canvas again, I'm going to go ahead and hit my selection tool and move that. There we go. Just position that, and then I'll rubber stamp it. And I'll just cover up these lamps because it's going to be these circles that I control. The properties of these circles, the color property is what I'm going to control. And that allows me to essentially change the traffic light. There we go. And I'll just choose this to make sure these are perfectly centered. They are. The other thing you'll notice, so these are each, okay, of course they're circles. They're really in the ellipse. And each, they're also called SVG elements. They're elements within an SVG graphic. And each element has like its own serial number. So it has its own ID. And then, these are automatically generated. So this ends in _2. And let's just take a look at this one. _3. And then what do you think? _4. Terrific. And that's how we're going to be able to address this circle versus this one versus this one. And then let's just rubber stamp the circle one more time. I'll hit my selection tool. And then I'll draw another circle, a circle within a circle. There we go. Hit my selection tool. Center that. This is going to be our push button. So I'll choose this fill, choose a radial gradient, and that's kind of my button. I'll then select both of these and hit G. So I just kind of dragged my cursor over top of these, selected them both, hit G for group. So this is now one element. It's all grouped together. And another thing that I like to do is kind of, these are all the graphics that I'm going to have on my canvas. So I usually like to fit the content like that and then kind of move this away from the edge a little bit. Okay. So we have our three elements here. We have our grouped element here. I'll right click on the grouped element and select branch options. These are the traditional LodeStar branch options. There's, this might be familiar to you. This is our branch options dialog. But now when we deal with code, like for example, you know that if you've had any experience that you can use a branch option to go to the next page, previous page, you can jump to a page, open a URL, add an overlay, do all these things, right? Well, you can also add code, execute commands. So I can click on the edit. You have to hit edit because this is not editable. There's our script editor right here. And I just make darn sure this is clicked on so this is active. And this is where we put in our code. And what I'd like to do is essentially put in some English just so that we can describe what it is we're trying to do. Basically, upon the click of that button, we want to get a long-term value for current light. So current light's basically going to be the storage spot. And we want to get, we have kind of short-term storage and we have slightly longer-term storage. So between clicks, we're going to have to get our value from slightly longer-term storage. That's what's happening. So we've got to get whatever the value of current light is. So we know whether we have a, what was last, the green light, the yellow light, or the red light. We've got to remember that. And so we're going to use a variable. We're going to learn how to use a variable to store that. And then basically, if we're doing this for the first time, there's not going to be a number stored. So it won't be a valid number. Therefore, we need to initialize it with 0. And then if that number, as long as it's less than 3, then we want to add 1 to it. So if it was 1 green, 1, we want to add 1 to it so that basically we're dealing with the yellow lamp, and then add 1 so we're dealing with the red lamp. And so we're going to have to learn how to use these if statements, these conditionals, to do that. Then once we've incremented, added a value, 1 to a variable, we want to store it in this longer term memory so that between clicks we can always remember where we were. We'll want to turn all the lamps gray, then light up one of the lamps based on whatever the value of current light is. So current light will become this variable, and whatever its value will take us down a different path. In other words, light up, change the SVG element, change its color property to a different value. So that's in English what we're trying to do. Now we'll replace our English with some code that actually accomplishes that inside of LodeStar. So here we go. This is a label, and this is arbitrary. We made this up. We're saying we're going to have a longer term storage. We can call it, if you're familiar with the term, global variable, where basically we have this memory area that persists through the life of the activity. So we can call this memory area anything we want. We're calling it current light, whatever, and we're using this function, this command, to get the value from current light and assign it to a local variable. So let's start from the beginning. VAR means variable. So we're defining a variable called current light, and that all has to be one word. Case matters. This is a convention. I have lowercase beginning, and then my noun here gets uppercased. So that's just a programming convention. Current light can't begin with a number. It has to be a letter. So we're creating a variable, a local storage spot, and it's going to receive the output from this function. So get value is a LodeStar function. And functions, okay, have an input. In this case, the input is the name of a place in memory. And they have an output. You can't really see this, but whatever the value is gets assigned to this local variable. So think of this as like a machine. We give it an input and it spits out an output which gets assigned to this variable. This is not an equals operator. This is an assignment operator. This equal sign means assign. So we're assigning the output of the rights to the left. Okay, so we have a variable now, current light, and we have a function, get value. So we've learned two things. We've learned a little bit about, hopefully, about variables. We know that they can store things, and we know that functions usually have an input and produce an output. Well, okay, let's apply that same principle to the next line. So our job now is, if it's not a number, we want to assign 0. Well, what's it? What do we mean? Well, we mean that okay, let's say this is the first time that we do it. The value inside of this memory area will actually be undefined because we've never done it before. This is the first time we're executing the code. It's not initialized. There's no value. So it's undefined. Well, we want, if it's undefined, then we want to at least initialize it with the value of 0. If it's undefined, we want current light to become 0. If it is defined, great. So we have a function, and this is a LodeStar function, but you see this is a very, very common function in all kinds of languages, is number. So if current light is undefined, is number returns false. So is number is a function. The input is current light. That's the variable here, not the name of the place in memory. It's the variable name. So the variable name, what actually gets passed here is the value of current light. If it's undefined, it fails this. It's not a number. Therefore, is num is false. Okay. If we've done it before, let's say current light becomes 1. 1 is a number. Therefore, is num will be true. So what can we do with that? Well, we can create a conditional. This is the use of the if statement. This is no different than the if statements that you'll find in an Excel spreadsheet. And if whatever this is, whatever is inside the parentheses evaluates to true, in other words, if it equates to true, then we execute this line. Else, we execute this line. So is num, the very, very first time, current light's undefined. Is that a number? No, that's false. If this evaluates to false, we skip this. So the code that's inside these parentheses, this is the if block. We skip that and we instead execute what's in the else block. So this seems a little silly. Let's say that the value of current light is 1. Current light, 1 gets assigned to basically stays the same number, which you rarely see something like this, but just for the sake of simplicity, I'm doing this. Okay, so what could we do instead, which makes a little more sense, is if isNum is false, we could flip it using this particular, this is an exclamation point, means if it's false, make it true. If it's true, make it false. And if that's the case, so if it's undefined and it's false, we're making it true. Therefore, we could take this statement, and notice I'm using these buttons here. Could take that statement and do something like this. So this is a little more compact. If isNum is false, it now becomes true. Therefore, this does get evaluated. If isNum is true, it's now false since nothing gets evaluated. Nothing gets executed. There's no else statement here. We don't need it because basically current light will stay whatever it was. So again, let's say current light. Let's say we had a green light. So current light will be 1. So current light's now 1. Is 1 a number? Yes, this is true. If this is true, then this gets flipped to false, and therefore this block never gets executed. So we've done this part. Now, if this doesn't make sense, you could do it the way I had it originally, and that's perfectly fine. Okay, now this will be a little simpler to understand in terms, this will be a little simpler to understand. So if If the current light is less than 3, add 1 to current light. Okay, so we have an if statement. If this evaluates to true, do this. Else, do this. Well, current light, let's say current light's 1. 1 is less than 3. Great. Therefore, this plus plus is an increment operator. Basically, it's the same thing as doing this. Current light equals current light plus 1. So that's perfectly fine. We could have that. Otherwise, if, let's say current light is now 3, 3 is not less than 3, therefore we execute this line. Current light gets back to 1. So we go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, green, yellow, red, green, yellow, red. And that's how we do that with the use of these if statements. Then whatever we do here, we got to save it in long-term memory, right? It has to persist between button clicks, otherwise we'll constantly forget. Otherwise, current light will always be undefined. So we have to store it. Well, where are we storing it? So we're using the opposite of get value, using set value. So set value is a function. In this case, it has a couple of inputs. One is the name of the place in memory where we want to store it, the longer term memory. And it's called current light. These have to match. And what's the value we want to put in? Well, whatever the value of current light is. So the very, very first time we do this, current light's undefined. Is undefined a number? No, that's false. False becomes true. Now current light is 0. Is 0 less than 3? Yes. Okay, great. So now 0 plus 1 is 1. 1 gets assigned to current light, and that's what gets stored. So we remember the fact that the light is green. So that next time the light will be yellow. Okay. Our next job is to change the colors to all the lamps to gray, and then whatever the current light is will then use that color. So first everything goes gray, and then if the current light is green, we'll turn the first lamp on. If the current light is yellow, then we'll turn the second lamp on, and so forth. But we got to kind of make sure that everything here is grayed out. So now, change color of what? How do we reference the right lamp? Well, that goes back to our IDs. So I'm going to save and close and go back and copy one of those IDs. So I'll save and close. And I'll go back to here. And I'll kind of double click here and then right click and copy. So I grab that ID _2. So this whole piece, I need this whole piece. And I'll show you how I use it. Go back to select branch options. Oops, not here. I have to do that here because this is the button we click on. Sorry. Okay. I'm going to edit. And I'm going to go ahead and put that ID of that element right here. And I'll do that here and here, but change this to 3 for the middle lamp and 4 for the top lamp, or the top light. Now, this is a bit of, this is the way we often express color values. We use a hexadecimal equivalent. Now, you could put in gray, and that would probably work out just fine. But to play it safe, I'm going to use, and to be more precise too, I am going to use the hexadecimal color values. Now, this is tricky We basically have 6 C's here. So we have these pairs. The first pairs define the red color. The second pair defines the green, and the last pair defines the blue. So if they're all equal, CC, so CC evaluates to, CC is hexadecimal for the decimal value of 210. Color values range from 0 to 255. 0 is black, 255 is white. So 210, 210, and 210. So 3 values of 210 turns out to be gray. So when we have equal red, green, and black in anything but pure white and pure black, we get a kind of a gray. If these were all zeros, then it would be black. If these were all F's, it would be white. And again, I could have used the word gray, and that probably would have worked fine. The next thing I need to do is, based on the value of current light, I want to go down a different path. I want to change the property of a different lamp, of a different circle, a different SVG element. So you use switch here. Switch is, what it's saying is I'm switching based on the value of current light. Current light is a variable. It's going to have a value, 1, 2, or 3. If it's 1, I'm going to change the color of that first lamp. I'm going to put it right here. And again, remember, you've got to actually use these buttons. Okay, that's the first lamp. What am I changing it to? Well, no value for red, full value for green, full value is no value for blue. So in other words, this is green. 00FF00 is green. Okay, then let's say current light's 2, so it's going to go down this path, case 2. Change color, let's grab this guy and put that right here. Which SVG element are we changing? We're changing this, the middle. What are we changing it to? Full red, full green. Full red and full green mixed produces yellow. So we're changing it to yellow. And then finally, let's copy this. Full red, no green, no blue. Turns out to be red. So this is green, this is yellow, this is red. This is the first circle, second circle, third circle, and we're addressing them by the element. We're done. We save and close, save, and then we make sure we have a little bit of a margin here. Save to page. So we're saving our graphic to the page. Let's see what we get. Let's go ahead and preview and see if we click on that button, if we actually get our lights to change. So here we're now displaying our project inside a browser. Again, the LodeStar tool is acting like a server and serving up this page. Here's our graphic. We click once, we get green. Click again, we get yellow, red, green, yellow, red, green, yellow, red. Current light is 1. Current light is 2. Current light is 3. If current light is less than 3, then we leave it alone. If it's not, then we set it back to 1, and that's what happens. So this is just an SVG element, and we're changing the color property of that element. This here is, when we click, it's executing a command. It's executing our branch option. So the use of, persisting information in this kind of long-term storage is useful in, case studies, decision-making scenarios, simulations. The use of functions is extremely important. So if we go back and just kind of review everything that we did, right-click, select branch options, we learned about a variable, and we know that a variable has to be one word and it can't begin with a number, and it stores a value. We learned about functions, and functions are, like they're special commands, and usually they have an input and then they produce an output. So get value is a function, isNumber is a function. Then we learned about conditional statements, and whatever is inside the conditional statement, the way it works is if whatever's inside evaluates to be true, then the thing inside the first set of braces gets executed. So in this case, if current light is indeed less than 3, then this gets executed, else this gets executed. And we learned that we needed to store, so that we store these values between clicks. We had to have a space in memory, and it's called current light inside of quotes. And this is the value we're putting into it. So there's a big difference between this and this because of those quotes. This is like a label. This is the actual value. And then we learned a little bit about color values, and we learned how to address an SVG graphic. And there are these color values. And this, again, this is something you can look up, but essentially 6Cs is gray. Then we learned about the switch statement. The switch statement allows us to go down a different path based on the value of current light. So if current light is 1, this happens. And then we break so that we don't execute 2. So if current light is 1, this gets executed, we break, and we're done. So if current light is 2, we execute this statement instead, and then break so that we don't fall into this case. And that sums it up. With these basic things, with variables and persisting things in memory and functions, you could go a long way. And then just lastly, if you want to test, so we run this, let's say we misspelled get value like that, and we test, then it's telling us that this is not a function. It's not a LodeStar function. So I'll go ahead and restore that, test it, and all is well. So thank you so much for hanging in there. There's an accompanying article to this. There's an FAQ. There's a lot, and of course, I also have references to some resources that are on the web where you can learn more about variables, more about functions, and so forth. With these few things, with just knowing a little bit about variables, a little bit about functions, a little bit about conditional statements, you can go a long, long way. Thank you so much. Until next time.